There's a fog over America now, with two large clouds, progressive left and progressive right. We've allowed ourselves to get to this point because we don't know history, and because our country, our states, and our people are moving towards godlessness, 1 degree at a time. But we can stop it. What stops a fog? A whirlwind. We can resist. And greater is he who is within us than he who is within the world. This is the fog and the whirlwind. All right, thank you everyone for tuning in and clicking on this episode of The Fog and the Whirlwind. I'm Josh, and I'm going to be interviewing my co-host of Zoo Nation and a personal friend and a political commentator, Nathan. Good to have you on.
Good to see you.
Yes, sir. This is a bit of a weird format. This feels like an episode of Zoo Nation, but it's not. It's actually an episode of my podcast, this one, The Fog and the Whirlwind. But give us about a week, and this is going to go up on Zoo Nation as well, in case people want to know more about you, frankly, and about what me to an extent, but it's mainly going to be an interview of you.
Right.
If people want to know more about me, they can look on this channel, The Fog and the Whirlwind, and see the origins of a political comic and see my origin story about where I've gone politically. So the way I want to kick this off, I think it's an important one, is how we met, first of all. And I haven't even told you, I think that the first time I remember seeing you was my sophomore, your freshman year in high school. And that's how I met high school.
Yep.
And we didn't really talk the first year, I don't think. I remember seeing you around, but we didn't really talk. Probably my junior year, sophomore year, we talked a little bit. But the main thing that I remember was after that, talking about Trump, my senior year, junior year. Mm-hmm. And one day we had talked casually once in a while, and we're friends. We're doing well with our friendship. And then one day you just pulled me aside and said, "Hey man, what do you think about Trump?" Because Trump announced, remember, June of 2015. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so this was probably a couple months after that. You wanted to know my thoughts, and so we talked. And pretty much from then on, we've talked politics. Yeah. And so there was a time after that we went to an automotive camp, and that was a good way to bond. We would talk to each other about multiple things, cars, but also politics and just life in general. Yeah. And so that was, to my recollection, the way this friendship began. Yeah. Unless you've got other stories you want to add, I think that's a pretty good way to set this up.
Pretty good.
So let's go into some of that. So I think a good first question, I'm going to have to look at some notes that I have written down. Right. But I think the first question that I have is just about you. Mm-hmm. My recollection is both of us were kind of like the nerds in high school.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You were, I were,
still
I
a nerd,
was.
so.
Yeah, me too. That hasn't changed. I haven't outgrown that.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think. So you were born in South Carolina.
Yes.
Okay, and raised as well. Was there ever a time you didn't live in South Carolina?
No.
Okay.
Been here 24 years.
And without going into specific names of schools, were you in the public school system before high school?
No. Before high school, in elementary school, I went to a Christian school. Then after in middle, what would have been middle school, I was homeschooled.
Okay. I thought so.
That didn't. I did well, academically and everything. That was fine, but I didn't get the socialization. And as you know me, I'm a very social guy. Once I get to know you and everything, I enjoy talking. Hence why, one of the reasons, I like the whole podcast idea because, talking. But yeah, so it didn't work out. And so, yeah, that's why, we ended up going to the same high school because, and that's why I didn't continue homeschooling in high school was because I needed social interaction at that time because it just, the homeschooling wasn't cutting it for me.
Oh, gotcha.
So, yeah.
So one thing, I think this is a good segue. and we're not going to go dwell on your childhood too much,
Yeah.
is that, and again, you don't have to go into details if
Oh,
you're
yeah, 100%.
uncomfortable. You had some health issues.
Yeah.
And one thing I remember that you and I did have a deep conversation that actually was not political about how God was using it as a way to bring you closer to himself.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to talk about your faith and the effect that, like, so you were raised in a Christian household.
Yes.
Okay. And just talk about your faith.
Yeah. Like you said, raised in a Christian household, Baptist, honestly, and talking about my health issues. I was raised in a Christian household, but I honestly, so I was brought up in the Christian faith, of course. But I would that being brought up in a Christian home does not make you a Christian. You and I would both agree. Nobody's born a Christian, of course. You have to choose to be born again. Of course, and accept accept God as your Lord and Savior. So I didn't do that for quite some time. I thought I had, because I think when you grow up in a Christian household, it makes it a little easier to be like, yeah, I agree, but like, okay, you agree, but have you accepted it yourself? Like, so that was one of the things I had to come to terms with. I had some health issues in high school, and I even before that, like, when I was younger, I was born with a disability called spina bifida. Which affects basically the nerves in the spine. So a lot of people born with my disability end up in wheelchairs. I got lucky. God, allowed me to be able to walk and everything. So if you look at me, you wouldn't be able to tell. I mean, you were surprised when I told you some of this stuff. Yeah,
I can't tell.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody ever can until I tell them and everything like that. But so I struggled with that.
Can we pause?
Yeah.
Like, are there different levels of severity?
Yeah, there are.
Okay.
So the disability, the way spina bifida works is there's an opening up on the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is actually coming out of where the vertebrae are. So they have to sew that back up. So the higher it is up on the spine, that the more issues you can have, such as paralysis of the legs, or even if it's onto the neck area, paralysis of the entire body, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So mine was low enough down to my tailbone area that nothing affected me except for like insides kidney stuff. Okay. So that's what ended up being an issue for me, especially in high school. It was an issue for me as a kid, but it got way worse into the high school time period and everything, as you know. So yeah, and going back into faith, I really think a lot of that was, a lot of God's plan to an extent of, teaching me a lot of things because I used to, man, why am I born like this? Why this? Why that? Because I struggle with the God makes no mistakes quite a bit. I struggle with that because it's like, wow, if God made no mistakes, what in the world's wrong with me? And it's like, I eventually ended up going to a camp with for kids that had my disability, and that really opened up my eyes of like, man, these guys, some of them had it worse than me, quote unquote, or whatever, and just they relate to me and everything. So that opened up my eyes as well. God allowed that to open up my eyes, and it just helped me understand, like, man, okay, first off, I need to like stop complaining, because these guys are in wheelchairs and they're not complaining.
How old were you when you went to this?
I was, when I first went, I believe I was 11 or 12. I think it was like 12, 13, somewhere around there, I believe. And then I continued to go all the way up until 18. I actually ended up becoming, did a little counseling there, becoming one of the counselors there for a little bit. After you have to take a year break if you were a camper. So when I was 20, I did some counseling there, and then the next year came back as well. Due to some COVID issues, when COVID hit, I did not go, the next couple of years or whatever. But hopefully this year, this summer, I'll be able to go.
Good.
But we'll see with that. But no, that God used that to really open up my eyes on some things of like, hey, you see these guys that have it quote unquote worse or whatever you want to say than you. You're not like that. Yet you're complaining. These guys aren't even complaining, and shoot, they're sitting here telling you they can do everything you can do, et cetera, et cetera. So that helped a lot just with opening my eyes to certain things. Now, even at this point in life, I still wasn't down the right path, salvation wise, and still had a lot of things. I kind of accepted the fact of, okay, yeah, this is how I am, and I want to use my disability to relate to people to an extent. So that was at least getting figured out in my life. Still, salvation was not a thing. I ended up having a surgery that was supposed to help with my kidneys and everything. The surgery ended up taking a lot longer than it was supposed to be. The surgery was about, it was supposed to be like 6 hours. It ended up being like 10, which that's quite some time.
And I assume you were completely unconscious?
Yeah, during the surgery.
How long was the recovery?
Well, the recovery from the surgery itself was about 2 weeks.
Okay.
I believe 2.5 weeks, something like that.
Go ahead and say what you're going to say.
But the problem is when I woke up from the surgery, I could not move the entire right side of my body. Well, the leg, but the entire upper right side of my body. They don't know what happened. To this day, we don't know what happened. But when I woke up, it was all numb. I couldn't move it. And I got terrified. Honestly, I thought I was going to die. I didn't know. You just wake up like that. I didn't get put to sleep like that. And now I'm waking up like this. What's going on? So, you hear about it. It was just the way God got my attention, And then in there is where I, accepted, God as my savior.
You were now how old?
I was about 15.
Okay.
Yeah, 15 years old. So that was, about almost 10 years, almost 10 years now. And what's funny, before that, the couple days before that surgery, I had actually gone to my grandmother's vacation Bible school at the time. And I've always been really interested in, Revelation and everything. And so when I was at that vacation Bible school, the leader there did a little teaching on Revelation and stuff like that, and just like his thoughts and everything. And he had done a little invitation for anybody who would wanted to accept Jesus at the time. And me, it's like, oh no, I'm good, but it's that message really just resonated with me still, because there was something there, in my heart. I could just feel it, like, just something, the Holy Spirit was definitely messing with me for sure during that whole time. But then, lo and behold, I didn't, again, I didn't get saved then. But then, I go in to have this surgery, and it's, that whole message of Revelation and everything just came back to me, of like, man, if you don't get saved tonight, and again, I didn't know if it was going to kill me or not. I didn't know what was going on. Like I said, if you don't get saved tonight, you are going to hell. And it's like, yeah, you were raised in a Christian family. Yeah, you agree with it. But just because you agree with it doesn't mean, that you're necessarily saved per se. You might agree with certain doctrine and everything like that, but that does not make you a Christian. What makes you a Christian is accepting the Lord Jesus Christ into your heart. And I hadn't done that. And so that's why I ended up getting saved. And then shortly thereafter, I ended up, leaving our high school, going to get my GED, because I still had continual health problems. And so, yeah, that was basically, the whole salvation story and everything.
Is it fair or correct to say that it went from being an intellectual knowledge or assent to being a heart change?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was definitely, I knew it here, but yeah, I didn't know it here. Okay. Like 100%. It was definitely, because growing up in a Christian school too, I elementary school, growing up in that, it's like I could recite Bible verses to you left and right, like, yeah, like, because we did these, we had Bible tests and everything like that. So I knew all that stuff. Like I had the knowledge, like mentally, right? But I didn't have the heart knowledge. So yeah, 100%. It's definitely fair to say that.
Very neat.
Yeah.
Very neat. Okay, well, if you don't have anything else to add, we can go on to the next topic.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else real quick? I'll give you the opportunity. Would you like to add to kind of like your childhood? Any other highlights? I mean, you mentioned health problems. You've mentioned faith. My next question, if you don't, is you would have considered yourself in school. Would you have considered yourself a nerd? You said yes. What about a gamer? I mean, were you a gamer?
Oh, 100%.
Well, so also a nerd, like nerd from birth, pretty much.
Oh yeah.
When did you
Since
start?
a kid.
When did you start playing games?
I started playing my stuff was the GameCube.
Okay.
And also Game Boy. Had the Game Boy. Love that.
Did you have the original?
Yeah.
I had the color.
Oh really?
I did not have.
I had the original. I had the color, and then my favorite one was the Advance, the Game Boy Advance. The flip one.
Never got that one.
That one, I love that one. Played a ton of like Mario and Donkey Kong. Used to get so frustrated with Mario and stuff because at the time I just wasn't good at it. So I'd always like get frustrated and have my mom, help me out on certain levels. And it was cool because she liked Zelda and stuff like that. So it was cool. Like my mom's kind of a nerd too, so that she kind of helped my nerdiness too. So that's where I got my gaming started. It was just pretty much since a kid.
And then, what else did you play as you got older?
As I got older, I had eventually got into like Xbox and everything like that. So I started playing like shooters like Halo. I got big into Halo. I loved Halo. Got into sports games because I've always liked sports and I'd rather watch the sport. But it's still fun to play the sports games.
Sure.
Honestly, I was just a guy that liked pretty much any game.
You a FIFA guy?
Not really.
Okay.
FIFA's like the one. FIFA and like NHL, I can't really do those ones. But like I always like basketball.
Well, I mean like the game FIFA.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant like the World Cup.
Yeah, the World Cup is cool, but like the game, I never really got into the game. I never really. I don't know.
There's an NHL game.
Yeah, there is.
On what?
Xbox and PlayStation. Yeah,
I did not know that. I've played a very old NHL game on Nintendo 64.
Oh yeah,
but and that one's actually really fun to this day.
Yeah,
but I'm not a huge gamer with consoles. I played a couple on PCs. I played a couple on consoles.
That's the one thing I've never gotten into is I haven't gotten into PC games.
I gotcha.
I've always had a controller in my hand.
Okay.
So I've gone through Xbox, PlayStation, stuff like that. I've loved all the consoles, honestly.
Would you have? Were you a guy that read a lot? Would you consider yourself like a bookworm back
Originally, no. Now, yes.
Okay. Cool.
And one of the reasons actually that I didn't read a lot is because now I've been tested for dyslexia and passed the test with flying colors to where I don't have dyslexia, or at least they say, but my disability does cause a little bit of slowness to learning and stuff like that to an extent, or like comprehension sometimes.
Okay.
So it's not that I don't read very well. So as a kid, I always hated it. But my mother, she would make me read. And I couldn't stand it. I always thought my mom was like mean for that. Thankfully, I know now that she's not. But as a kid, man, I couldn't stand her making me read, especially when she would make me read out loud sometimes. Because even to this day, I don't like reading out loud just because I don't know. My mouth doesn't connect with what my brain's reading or something. But I can at least read out loud a lot better than I could at the time. But so that was kind of one of the reasons I didn't read when I was a kid, is just because I really like stories and everything. I loved it, but I couldn't read it. Or I could. I didn't want to put in the effort and everything like that. But yeah, nowadays I definitely read a lot. So
cool.
yeah.
So this is going to be where we start transitioning into politics, but we're still going to be talking some about home life.
Yeah.
What are, if you're comfortable with saying, I think you are.
Yeah.
What are mom and dad's politics?
Republican, conservative. Conservative.
Okay.
I don't want to say Republican because it's, but yeah, conservative.
And how did that start coming out in childhood? Would dad be the one talking about it at home? Would mom be the one talking about it at home?
Honestly.
Would it just kind of casually come up once in a while?
Yeah, it just casually, in our household, it didn't really nobody really talked about it.
Okay.
As far as oh, this is happening. Now, we'd have on the debates and stuff like that, so I knew that's when things would definitely come out. But most of the stuff just kind of casually came out. When we were talking about religious belief and stuff like that, or when we were talking about just what was going on in the world or whatever. So a lot of that stuff came out just, naturally, and that's how I, learned my parents' beliefs from there. So, So yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so we're going to begin with what you identify politically as, and then we're going to kind of break it down some.
Yeah.
So let's begin with that. What do you identify as politically? What label?
So I prefer conservative libertarian.
Okay.
Mainly conservative, but I honestly believe that most people have have at least a little bit of libertarianism in them. Just because of the fact that you don't want government in every aspect, at least some aspect of your life. So I definitely do have some libertarian in me, but I'm more conservative because I do believe to an extent, we do need a government, but a very, very small government. Yeah, so definitely libertarian conservative is where I fall in there. Now, before that, though, I ended up going to college for psychology because, again, back to the story of just wanting to help people with being able to relate to people with my disability and stuff like that. I wanted to go into psychology. Well, college, man, that was interesting because when I went in, it was a lot of victim stuff. At least what I studied, it was a lot of people are victims, et cetera, et cetera. So it taught a lot of victim mindsets, and to an extent, some of the stuff they teach with the psychology field was okay and understandable. But a lot of what they're missing is the God aspects of things, and also so I did have a phase where I was like I don't want to say I was like a full-blown liberal, but I was a leftist for a little bit, but I wasn't like, forget all these people, or like, I was never strong. I think what really got me to question some of my like left-leaning beliefs at the time was when Trump ran, honestly. Because it was like, man, why is everybody like hating on this guy when like he doesn't have crazy ideas? And I realized that a lot of the left is really just playing victim. And I got tired of the victim mindset too, because that's just not how I was raised. And again, no matter how hard you have it, there are things you can do, et cetera. And just also I came to realize that the left believes a little too much in the government needs to fix your problems, not you need to fix your problems. It's like, I agree that everybody can use some help here and there for sure, but it's not the government's job. That's your community's job. That's, the church's job. That's, there's so many other things aside from the government that should be helping or could be helping. So that's kind of what I had to come into a realization of at the time. But yeah, now definitely a conservative libertarian for sure. So,
okay.
yeah.
So let's break that down some. So my understanding, so you were raised by people that were conservative. Yes. When did you take your left turn that you just kind of said? How old? Because I thought at first you said you were in college, and then you said what brought you out of it was Trump running, and that was high school.
And I was, so going back to like us in high school, I was conservative-ish in high school because you and I agreed on a lot of things, but what really kind of drove me away to an extent, or at least made me look at other things, was that there was that one guy who would insult anything that who I'm talking about.
Yes.
Who would insult anything that you disagreed with him on or thought there could be a better way. So that kind of pushed me.
And by the way, that's not a side joke. He's not talking about me.
Yeah. Not you. You at least would like hear me out on certain things of like, I don't think it should be like that or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then it's like, if with this one guy that we knew, it's like, if you disagreed, it was like, you're an idiot. It's like, but that's not how it works, because I know I'm not stupid. But no. But yeah, so that kind of like pushed me away to where it's like, I didn't really care about politics, and also it was like, all right, there's got to be like something else out here, and if this is how conservatives are, that's not for me.
Right, correct. Because to clarify, this other person was a hardcore conservative.
Oh yeah, very hardcore.
I assume still is. We have no relationship, right. To my knowledge. Neither one of us has any relationship.
I haven't talked to him in so long.
So for that reason, I can understand why. Oh well, if that's a conservative, I want no part of it.
Exactly, and that's that. Even now, like, I don't like the hard right like that. Like, I don't like hard. I wouldn't say I don't like, but I don't agree with people that have a crazy hard right or even a crazy hard left opinion of like, if you don't agree with my opinion, you're an idiot. No, that's not how anything should work. That especially politics, So yeah, that for a time period did drive me away from politics in general, but also just the conservative movement for a little bit, at least to like search out some other things just to see what else was out there. So then I ended up having to drop out of high school and go get my GED due to the health issues and everything. Didn't really care much about politics at the time just because I wasn't really talking to anybody. I mean, there were people that were there getting their GEDs that I kind of talked to, but we didn't talk politics. We talked music and everything else. But then I would go to college. Then I go to college, and politics were brought up so much. So it's like, oh, I'm kind of back into it. But now it's like a college leftist twist of things and everything. So I'm kind of learning their doctrine of everything. So it's like, this sounds accepting and everything. And it sounds good. It sounded good at the time. And but then, I start bringing some of this up to my family and stuff. So they kind of explain to me why some of the holes, and also, just everything else. And also I did some research myself, and looked into a lot of it. And it's like, man, yeah, a lot of this actually doesn't line up. And also in college, I started looking at a lot of podcasts. And at the time, and he's still pretty big too, Charlie Kirk was, I don't know if he was really popular, but for me, it started appearing on my feed a lot. And his big thing is he's always been pretty against colleges for the most part, unless you're going to for specific things like engineering and stuff like that. But he disagreed with people going for things like, arts and stuff like that. And I can understand why, because it's nothing but, for the most part, nothing but a liberal agenda being pushed anyway. And so I started listening to him, and I'm like, man, this is really challenging what I'm learning in college. And so I started asking my teachers in college questions, during classes when they would bring things up, and actually irritating some of my professors and everything because I was asking these questions. So that actually brought me back to the conservative side of things, because it's like, oh, so y'all do actually get the same way that, that one very conservative friend got. It's just a matter of you kind of hide it at first.
Well, and, so not the same political positions, but the same partisan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you don't agree with me, you're a moron, whatever. And it's like, okay. It's like, so there is a happy medium somewhere, or, there are, not everybody's like that, so, but it's like, I don't know. So that definitely pushed me away from the liberal side of and just, it didn't line up biblically either, so it's like, I did a lot more in-depth, search into the Bible, more in-depth search into policies and stuff like that in general. So yeah, really college is where I got big into why I believe what I believe as far as conservative.
So maybe this is kind of right. So you kind of were conservative as a young man, let's say, very young, like middle school, early high school, but then this person kind of pushes you away from the right to one extent. Yeah. You're not quite a complete lefty, but you're not as conservative as you were. Right. Then you go to college where you do start to move in a leftward direction, but then that stopped. Yeah. And it basically has landed you where you are currently.
Yeah, exactly.
I got you. Okay.
100%.
So you've kind of expounded a little bit on, the next question literally after what do you identify as politically was, have you always been that? We've kind of answered that question. The next one is, if you have not always been a conservative libertarian, what values do you think stayed the same?
So I've never, as far as values go, I've always wanted to be Christ-centered. So that's always been a thing. Even with the left thing, when I was going through that left time period, the left has a way of making Jesus sound like a socialist and stuff like that. Now, again, I had to, do some research into that. And it's like some of it did sound like, yeah, Jesus was this, Jesus was that. But it's like, but no. So I did have to, it did, some of it does sound good, but you have to do some real research into it. And what does the Bible really say, et cetera, et cetera. But values that have, or really honestly disagreements, even when I was in that little leftist stage, I've never agreed with the LGBT stuff. Now the stance that has still stayed the same on the LGBT is the libertarian side of things, of do what you want, but leave me and my family out of it, or other people's family. And now that's kind of expanded to leave children out of it in general, but still it's the same stance there of hey, when you're an adult, you can do as you please, whatever, just, don't murder, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, so I've always kind of had that libertarian stance of things on things like that, of hey, do you, that's cool. Just leave me alone, And even with the liberal thing, I still haven't wanted the government. It was weird. I was like a liberal libertarian, which that's really hard to add to get mixed together to an extent, because it was like I really wanted the government involved. It was like I wanted the government involved for homelessness and just other things out there. But it's like I started doing more research into that, and it's like, well, shoot, the government's already involved in a lot of things. And then where the government is even more involved, i.e. California, homelessness is actually worse. So how do we fix like homelessness and stuff like that? You actually get your community involved. You get your churches involved. That's you, the individual person, is the one that actually can cause a better change in the government, not just looking towards one dude. You know, one person can't fix the problem, but a community can fix a problem for their community. You know, so that was something that I had to figure out. But I always had the stances of, you know, helping people. You know, that was my big, like, which side helps people more or has a better idea of helping people more or a better way of helping people more. So I always wanted to understand the leftist side of view, and that was the government thing. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great, because helping people out. But then I was like, oh, wait, you're screwing other people in the process. That doesn't sound too great. You know, it's like, yeah, it's not a Robin Hood thing here. That Robin Hood wasn't a good, you know, good thing, guy. Debatable on who you're talking to. But I mean, Robin Hood was still a thief, you know? I mean, that's not good. So yeah, values that have kind of just stayed the same, really, honestly, as the libertarian stuff. If you guys do you, I'm gonna go over here and do me.
Okay.
But then with the liberal stuff, the liberals don't let you do that. Mm-hmm. You have to be involved with certain things. You have to do so. And also, again, like I said, the want to help people was a big value for me.
So yeah, and you've answered some of this, but if you want to go deeper, so I asked you what has stayed the same, what has changed?
I've answered what stayed the same. Mm-hmm. What's changed?
From where you were to being a conservative libertarian today.
So what has changed as far as that goes? I used to be a lot more aggressive for things. Like, I actually, to an extent, if you disagreed with me, I thought you were kind of boneheaded. You know, like, on any stance. Like, this is more towards when I was, like, kind of looking at the liberal side of things. So it's like, I think that kind of, like, poured in a little bit. So that definitely has changed. Of like, now it's more of, I'm like, no, you guys aren't boneheaded, but like, hey, try looking at multiple views. You know, that more of an understanding. I have more of a caringness towards people, even if they disagree and everything like that. So that's kind of something that's changed. Beliefs. Big thing that changed for me is I kind of was not against guns, but I was against like some gun, or I was for some, you know, gun reform and all that type of stuff. Now I'm like, yeah, that's a bad idea. Because once they start doing one thing, they, you know, you give them an inch, they take a mile type thing. And so that's definitely, that's really been a big thing. Because at that time, school shootings were a big thing at the time.
Yes.
So it was like, okay, yeah. And it's like, so, and at that time I was looking at my, you know, liberal stuff. So it's like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But I also wasn't doing the other thing of where I should have been looking at both sides. That's really the thing, is like, that's also something that's changed in me, is like, hey, believe what you want, but like, at least look at both sides of things, just so you have like an idea of what both sides believe, so you can also at least combat the other side too, you know? So yeah, really, a lot of my beliefs have always, for the most part, lined up with the conservative agenda. It was just a matter of, I ended up, you know, in college getting a taste of the liberal side of things, and I was like, this sounds decent, but then, you know, it was just a little phase. So nothing really changed too much, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next question, and I didn't know you had this phase. My next question was, and I'm gonna have to rephrase it on the spot. My next question was, why are you not a leftist? But let's go into why you didn't stay. So I'm hearing, number one, it sounds like you got more open-minded. Like, rather than saying to someone that was more conservative than you were at that moment, you're boneheaded. That was the phrase you used. Mm-hmm. You started reconsidering, like for example, well, with school shootings, if we did make guns harder to get, you started considering different things.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
And that was like something that they didn't, critical thinking. They didn't really teach that in at least my study, right? In the psychology human services study, they didn't really teach this whole critical thinking. No, this is how it is. This is how it should be. This is what is proven to help. Well, is it really proven to help though? Let's look at those stats for a minute, and so that's where I really got big into stats and stuff too. And so, yeah, I don't know, that's what made me question a lot of things, is just a lot of, I don't know, just this is how it is. And it's like, I've never liked that.
there would be facts that from the position you were currently in, you couldn't wrap your head around. Yeah. And rather than saying, oh, that can't be true, and basically saying this fact doesn't fit, I'm going to push it away, you said, well, I don't fit with the fact.
Right.
So I'm going to change.
Exactly.
I'm going to change my political philosophy.
It's like, well, I don't fit with the fact, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that doesn't fit with the fact, and some of the facts that people use, it's like, is that a fact or is that like a statistic that you're, claiming? And there's other, is it really a fact or is that an opinion, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. What keeps you, so whenever I hear you say conservative libertarian, I don't know about you, I think of there kind of being like a hyphen, conservative dash libertarian, right? What keeps you from calling yourself just a conservative without a hyphen?
I think
you mentioned some of the hands-off like LGBT stuff, but so we can go there, but generally speaking, what keeps you?
Because I think if you went full-blown conservative, even though you have a small government, they still are pretty much involved or have a little bit of a hand in kind of almost everything. Very, very small, but it's like, for example, the LGBT stuff. I honestly think that should remain untouched by government unless it is affecting children. But to an extent, that's like, oh, well, we need government. So, I don't know. There's just some areas with things that just don't need to be touched, as far as like in the household, etc., TV shows, whatever, let the people decide certain things, not the government decide certain things. And, conservatives for the most part agree with that, but I don't know, there's just some things that government doesn't need to have its role in. That should be the family, that should be the people or the church, whatever, that have their, hands in these things that determine the status quo or determine, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that, I guess that's also what kind of prevents me from going full libertarian.
Well, we'll go there later.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. But, so that's kind of what prevents me from going full conservative, is just I think the conservative movement doesn't, or conservatives don't have, they want limited government, but they don't know how much limited government they want. So that's I think that's kind of where I get the libertarian.
I love that. That's very interesting. We can go into maybe that a little bit more. Yeah. When you think of conservative, number one, what comes into your mind? And this can be like faces with names, like people. Or secondly, what is a conservative?
Yeah. I mean, Trump had a lot of conservative values for the most part. I mean, at least when he first started out. America First, honestly, that's not necessarily against conservative values, so I do kind of think of Trump to an extent. Now, currently, maybe not as much. He has gone a little, I don't know. There's been a couple times where Trump's kind of gone a little, just, he's been out there for me. Like a conservative, Ben Carson.
Okay.
Ben Carson. That's a guy that I think of as like just a kind of cool, calm, collected, and like we're really trying to figure this out, best solution ever. Which is also one of the reasons he lost against Trump, is because he was cool, calm, collected, and wasn't going to get into the arguing matches with Trump and everything like that. But yeah, no, I do believe that Ben Carson is a 100% true conservative, and I liked a lot of his stuff. So yeah, I'd have to say probably Ben Carson. Also,
okay.
I would think for the most part with a conservative Christian, I believe that conservatism, most of conservatism lines up with Christian values as well.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. Things that you agree with conservatives on.
Guns, the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Most of the LGBT stuff to an extent. Again,
okay,
a little
funny.
libertarian-ish, but then when you get kids involved, that's bringing the government in. So it's like a catch-22 type thing of like kind of some government, but that's only if,
right.
Yeah.
So in that situation, your conservative side comes out.
Yes, to an extent, yeah. When you involve kids.
Yes.
But when it's adults, it's like libertarian.
Okay.
So yeah. But when it's kids, conservative.
Okay.
Let's see. So yeah, guns. What else? Oh, border control.
Okay.
A lot of now the conservative movement has moved towards America First stuff. So America First stuff as well. Illegal immigration. Any other stuff?
Well, let's break down America First further. When you say America First, what comes to your mind?
Oh, there we go. A lot of production of our own stuff. Stop with the made in China crap. Stopping with this made in China. I mean, we can do some things made in China, of course, but most of our materials need to be made here in America. And we self-efficient. Being self-efficient, and the conservative movement has moved a lot towards that and wanting that. So I'm definitely for us first, as far as getting out of a lot of deals like the Paris Climate Agreement and all this other stuff that we're putting more into and everything like that. I'm all for helping people out, or other countries too, but we can't be the only ones putting in, no more than another country should, et cetera, et cetera. So those are a lot of the values that I line up with on the conservative side of things.
All right. Anything else that you want to add to the basket of things you don't agree with conservatives on? You've already mentioned some of the LGBT stuff. Is there anything else where you're like, well, this keeps me from calling myself just a conservative?
No,
You think you covered it?
Yeah, I think I covered it for the most part. I mean, it's except for the fact of, like I said, the conservatives don't exactly know where they shouldn't have the limited government. They want the limited government, but where they shouldn't have government at all. That's the one thing that kind of prevents me there.
They have a drawing the line problem.
Yeah, exactly. There you go, drawing the line. Yeah.
Now we're going to get into something I said we were going to get here. What keeps you from calling yourself just a libertarian without a hyphen?
So libertarian, the problem that I have with just calling myself a libertarian is because there's a bunch of different sides of libertarianism. So that's part of the problem. Is there's like a lot of there's different sanctions, or whatever you want to call them, of conservatism too. So that's also a problem for conservatism too.
Yes.
But libertarian's a little more complicated, because it's like you want limited government, but yet you're running for a role of government. So it's like, I don't know, but I do agree with limited government, but I still believe. I mean, I agree with, like, the people should be able to govern themselves to an extent, but what happens when you have big population, global, I'm not global, but like country issues, like, I don't know. There are certain things that I do believe that there needs to be some government intervening and things like that. For example, imprisonment, stuff like that. The military, stuff like that, you know. And again, a little bit of the LGBT stuff, like, again, when it involves kids, that's where the government should step in. Whereas, like, you can get a little too far libertarian. I have met a couple people that have been too far libertarian that, like, no, that you shouldn't touch people at all in general. It's like, whoa, but if people are in harm, it's like, but again, the libertarian itself, like, the actual definition would disagree with that. Those people that call themselves libertarian, you shouldn't touch people at all. No, because libertarians believe that, if others are being harmed, then you can't do that. Like, So I don't know. There's just it's all the different sanctions and everything that kind of, sanction sections. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, but so that's kind of same thing with the conservatives. So yeah.
What is a libertarian? Just define that, and then also who do you think of when you hear libertarian?
So who I think of, honestly, Rand Paul is pretty close, in my opinion. He also leans more a little to the conservative side as well, but I mean, I think he honestly leans a little more libertarian than he does conservative. I mean, he does seem pretty government, like less government. What I think of when I think of a libertarian, I think of a person that just wants to govern themselves and, you know, not have to worry about, you know, Uncle Sam taking money, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of what I think about from a libertarian and what a libertarian is for the most part. Also, back to that, taxation. A lot of libertarians believe that, you know, taxation is theft. To an extent, I can agree. That's one of the things that stops me from calling myself a full libertarian as well, is the taxation thing, because I do believe taxation for certain things isn't necessarily theft per se. Now, again, we can disagree or argue that, yeah, it's still theft, but I don't know. I still agree with limited taxation for, like, you know, the funding a military, funding certain things, of course.
What other things?
Like I said, the military, I want to say schools, but the way schools are going now, it's difficult to even say schools, but for sure the military's, you've got a lot of some of these government shelters. Now again, if the community stepped up more, we could talk about not having funding for these things, of course, and I'd be down for that. But the problem is the community, or the way the world is going, our communities are not stepping in as much as they should, you know. So that's part of the problem, as to where I am kind of okay with some of these things, if that makes sense.
And there's a real chicken and egg thing. Are the people stepping back because government is
100%,
involved,
exactly,
or is it that government won't let them get involved?
Right, exactly.
It's hard to figure out.
Right.
What exactly?
100%.
So what else? So you would have an executive branch, you would have a judicial branch, you would have a legislative branch.
Yes.
Basically the way that the founding fathers intended.
Yes, I would have it the way the founding fathers intended.
Okay.
And I believe the libertarians, for the most part, do believe that they would have a lot like that, as the founding fathers intended it as well. Now, again, I think there are some other branches that just want everything to fall apart, but sure. I think those are more left-leaning libertarians. So I don't know, but the taxation thing, it's not. I have disagreed on that one. To me, it's not. It is, but it isn't. You know, like in certain areas, I wish there was like a system, and you and I have talked about this before, where you could, like, you know, yeah, I'll pay taxes for this, this, and this, you know, and like the government's okay with that. That'll never happen. But like, yeah, in a perfect world, I guess. But yeah, so I'm not necessarily against all taxation, but you know, a liberal taxation, of course, you know, sure. Also, I kind of think like property tax is a little stupid. So I guess I would agree with the libertarian on that type of thing and everything. But yeah, so, and I would agree that, you know, property tax, like, no, that's my land. Why am I paying taxes on my land? Yeah, I mean, no, that's ridiculous. But yeah, but certain funding for certain things. Again, I want to say the schools, but I can't say the schools, like public schools. All right, so I'm going to say I'm okay with our tax dollars going towards the public school system in a perfect world, right? Because there are people out there that don't have enough money to send their child to said school, you know, to a private school or to other schools, or whatever, or just don't have the transportation, and that is the only school. So I am okay for funding education for our government. The problem is not the government we have right now.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm okay with it if it's not under Joe Biden's government, or, you know, yeah. Okay. A lot of other people out there, but yeah.
So you said something a bit ago that regarding property taxes, you said I would agree with libertarians on libertarians on that. Mm-hmm. What other things would you say? Well, with libertarians, you're right about this. Like what else would you say?
leave me alone. A lot of libertarians that I've met is you do you, I do me, and just leave me alone, and we're good. And I'm cool with that. I believe it's also kind of how the founding fathers intended it too. Like everybody has the right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness and everything, and property. So life, liberty, and property. So I agree with those. You have the right to pursue life, liberty, and property, and also happiness. So now that is one thing that I think the libertarians can get a little off on is the happiness side of things. The left-leaning libertarians, can kind of get off on is like, well, my happiness is, me with children. No. That's not okay. So, so I think it's not so much that I disagree with libertarians. I disagree with certain sections of the libertarian branch. Okay. So yeah, I think that's kind of really what it is, because there's a lot of stuff that I do agree with, just like same with the conservative, so yeah.
You mentioned the sentiment of all taxation being theft being something you disagree with. Yeah. What other things, generally speaking? I mean, if you have anything, you've already mentioned some.
Yeah.
I disagree with libertarians on this and this. Yeah. What else would you add? One thing that I think of, maybe this will help kick things off.
Yeah.
Is the war on drugs.
Yeah.
Because there's some of that. You do you, man, and I'll do me. And there's a lot of people that say, so that means if I'm doing drugs.
Yeah.
What that, but also what other things would you disagree with libertarians?
Yeah, so the war on drugs for sure.
Okay.
And yeah, the war on drugs, that's got to be a big one for sure. Also, religious belief, and maybe this is more conservative side of things, because again, you do you. But there's a lot of harmful, like, not even... There's a lot of harmful religions without even bringing, any up. But there's a lot of harmful religions and so-called beliefs that we don't need in America. So I would disagree with a libertarian on, the you do you thing. So it's really the philosophy, I think. It's not really a policies that I necessarily disagree with. It's a philosophy can go too far. Of, like, for example, the philosophy of you do you can go too far.
Okay.
So, and that can be on anything. That can be on immigration. That can be on the drug war. That can be on religion. That can be on, any, taxation, anything.
Okay.
So, I mean, that can be on all of that. So yeah, it's really some of the philosophy that just can, like, all right, so how far does that go? You know? So yeah.
So I got a number of questions, and try to be concise with them because we are starting to get low on time. We're not done, but we are starting to get there. So I got a number of issues, and in this way, I want you to just answer. Don't say, you don't necessarily have to say, this isn't about your libertarian stances or your conservative stances. This is about your conservative libertarian.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to begin. You kind of said all this already. You mentioned the size of the government. What about the Constitution? Do you line up on it's pretty much perfect? Are there things you would say you disagree with the Constitution, or what would you say?
For the most part, I would say the Constitution is pretty much perfect. Now, I would say for the digital era, I think there are certain things that might need to be, like, for example, freedom of speech. All right, what do we need? Like, yeah, where does the digital era fall into freedom of speech? And that's kind of one of the wars that we fall into now. But I do think that it's a living document.
Okay.
So yeah.
And that was number 2, the Constitution. Freedom of speech was like number 8, but let's go ahead, since you mentioned freedom of speech, and hit it. So you think government does need to do more to protect freedom of speech?
Yes, 100%.
What needs to be done?
We don't have enough time in this episode.
Quickly.
No, there's a lot that needs to be done, but without government, people just need to grow a backbone, for one. And just, somebody called you a name? Boo-hoo. Now, move along. And, let that person be punished or whatever, something like that. But anyway, aside from the point. No, I really don't know what needs to be done, because part of me wants to say, well, the government should step in. But then there's the libertarian side of me that's like, no, the government does not need to step in because that's a bad idea.
Are we talking specifically like free speech online?
Yeah.
What about free speech in like the workplace and stuff like that?
Free speech in the workplace. Now, the one thing with the workplace that I say, when you agree to, if I agree to work for you, I'm also representing you.
Mm-hmm.
If you disagree with something that I say, as far as now, unless it goes against my religion or
mm-hmm.
something like that, if I go off and call somebody a racial slur, I'm representing you too. I should not be allowed to. I'm agreeing to abide by your rules.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm agreeing to abide by your rules, that is my choice. And that's the great thing about America, is I'm agreeing to, I have the ability to agree to your rules, but then I also have the ability, if I don't like them, I can leave mm-hmm. and go find another job. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the great thing about the way America works. And unlike communism, you know, where, yeah, if you don't like it, doesn't matter, you still work.
Yeah.
You know, so that's kind of where I fall with that, is I'm okay to an extent, but companies can take it too far. So I do think there should be a little limitation of what companies can and cannot do to limit your freedom of speech.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gun rights. You mentioned you agree a lot with conservatives on gun rights. Shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So machine guns are okay.
Sure.
Fully auto.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, now, I don't believe that you should just be like, I'm cool with the CWP. Like, you need proper training of gun safety.
Okay.
And like, as far as, you know, not gun control, gun safety. You know, just knowing how to use a gun. As long as you know how to actually use a gun, and you you go through the proper training. Yeah, sure. I personally
for all guns, or only for
all
certain
guns.
kinds.
For all guns.
So in order to own a gun, you have to know how to use it.
You should have to know how to. I mean, if you want to drive a car, you have to know how to drive a car.
So you shouldn't be able to go and just buy a gun.
In my opinion, no.
Okay.
Because, and again, that's for safety of you, and that is also for just safety of others, safety of animals, whatever. You know, again, same thing with a car. You have to get a driver's license to be able to legally use a car. So that is my personal belief on that.
So even if you're not carrying it on your person, I want to get you on record here.
Okay.
Even if so CWP, I get that you're carrying it concealed on your person around people.
Yeah.
But even to buy a gun at all, you're saying you should.
Oh, okay. So if you're not gonna be using, so like just like talking about like gun collecting or something like that.
Anything. Just I want a gun. I want to buy a gun.
Okay, then yeah, no, maybe not, but you could use that excuse as, oh, I'm not gonna use it. I'm just buying it. So there,
or for home defense.
Yeah, if you're gonna use it for home defense, I do think you should again know how to use it. Gun safety is a very important thing in my opinion. You know, again, just because you want to protect yourself in the sense of you want to make sure the barrel is pointed the right way. Nobody, again, but you get my point. So again, that it's. I'm in the middle as far as like yes and no, on that of yes, 100% go out and buy you a gun. And I agree. But at the same time, you at least should know how to use or understand the danger of, or not danger, because it's humans that are dangerous, not the gun. People kill people, not guns. But I do believe, again, just like with a car, in order to legally drive a car, you have to pass a driver's test.
Okay.
The same thing with a gun. You should at least know how to shoot it, how to properly unload it, reload it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Good. Where do you line up on abortion?
Abortion, life begins at conception. Gracious, I couldn't think of the word. Yeah, life begins at conception. Abortion is murder.
Okay. So abortion should be outlawed?
Yes.
No exceptions, or with some exceptions?
People make the argument about, well, what about rape? That's less than 1%.
Okay.
So it's not a good argument.
And we've, by the way, made an episode on Zoo Nation about this. If you want to hear more about our thoughts on this.
Yeah, so you could definitely go back onto that on Zoo Nation for sure, to get like the in-depth on that. But in the cases of rape, it's really not a good argument for one. I mean, we could argue it, but I'm not going to do it for sake of time.
Real quick, would you make an exception for rape?
No, because why should the child, if it was me, no. Why should the child suffer for another person's bad mistake? Now other people say, well, why should the mother suffer for the for somebody's bad mistake?
Again, bad action, not a mistake.
Yeah, not a mistake, but bad action. Right. So, but no, again, life begins at conception. You know, so that's a life. Why should you take another life just because somebody, had an evil intent?
Mm-hmm.
Why should you take an innocent life because somebody had an evil intent?
Mm-hmm.
That's my question.
Okay.
So yeah.
Where do you stand on police? Law enforcement.
I'm for police. I do believe that there are some bad apples, but I do not believe that all cops are bad. I'm for the police for sure. I do think there's some things that we could do better with some of our cops, probably a little more training and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm definitely for the police.
Okay, that's good. Let's keep it concise. Where do you line up, generally speaking, on war? When to go to war, when to not go to war, big military, small military?
For the most part, if we're not attacked, we stay out of it.
Okay.
For the most part. Now, again, with certain allies, maybe I'm for helping out, but not for completely going to war.
Okay.
Unless extreme measures, So, but mostly, if we are not attacked, we don't go to war.
Okay. You mentioned war on drugs, so let's be concise. You would not legalize everything or decriminalize everything. Would you legalize or decriminalize certain things?
It's yes and no, because statistically, I would leave that up to the states.
Okay, you would.
Yeah.
You'd make it a state issue.
Yes, that's a state issue in my opinion.
For anything regarding substances. So, for example, what Oregon has done of legalizing everything, but that's one state.
Yeah.
So under the Constitution, you would say okay.
Yeah, under the Constitution, I think.
And Colorado, recently, I think, what was it? Not shrooms, but what's the term?
Psychedelics.
There you go.
Yeah, psychedelics.
They made that legal recently, and I think back in whenever it was, 2013 or 15 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They made weed legal.
Yeah.
So you're good with that.
Yeah.
But you're also,
I'm not good with it. But state issue, yes.
That's what I mean. Mm-hmm. But you're also, by that same token, fine with South Carolina. Basically, I think the only thing is CBD, maybe medical marijuana. I don't even know for South Carolina. But you're also good with that.
Yeah, I'm cool with it being a state issue. I don't think that's a federal issue.
So you would want the federal government out of it, but you would be okay with state government.
With states cracking down on it or not cracking down on it. I believe that the state should crack down on it, but
so in your state, this state, you would vote against that.
I would vote against. I would vote against what
against making it legal.
Yeah, I would vote against making it legal.
So everything you would...
Oh, all these... If you look up the statistics, even just for weed, the weed is it's the gateway drug to other things happening, not gateway drugs to other people using drugs, but gateway drugs to other issues happening in that state. Look at California, look at Oregon, where they started. They started with weed, and then now look at where they're at with the legalization of things such as opioids and stuff like that. So yeah, I would, against me personally, on where I would vote, I would definitely vote on no, would not make it legal.
So what about but you referenced this, I'm just making sure, a very specific vote on marijuana. You would say no, of recreational, let's say first recreational, you would say no. For South Carolina, illegal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What about medical?
You'd have to use it in a hospital.
Okay.
That would be my, if it was a way of, there would have to be in hospital use only. Okay. Something like that.
Okay. Speaking of hospitals, healthcare, where do you typically line up regarding single payer, universal healthcare, not universal healthcare, what private systems what would you go for?
Mainly single payer, but all healthcare systems are kind of they all have their issues. But social healthcare sucks, so we'll go with that. Canadian healthcare is bad, but single payer.
So you are for that?
Yes, for the most part, I'm for that. But there are issues within the healthcare
system. What would you want our country to look like regarding that? What other country would be a good parallel? Look, they got it right.
I honestly couldn't get... I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I think America's system is not perfect on healthcare, but we are better than a lot of other countries.
Okay. We're not a single payer system.
Well, yeah.
But you do want it to be.
Yeah, but I do want it to be.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So... Yeah, I don't know.
So your problem with Obamacare is not that it's universal health care. Your problem with Obamacare is how it was implemented?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know. The healthcare is that's not a concise subject.
Okay. But okay, let's go quickly. Would you agree with the statement healthcare is a human right?
No.
Okay.
No. So what were the other options on there that you gave me?
Private systems, single payer.
I like no wait. So I'm gonna retract that because misunderstanding. I like the private.
Okay.
I do like private system. Because that keeps the government out of things. I like the private healthcare. Okay. It's your choice.
Okay.
And yeah, going without it or with it.
It's why this is helpful to define these terms.
Yeah, 100%.
Good.
That was a total misunderstanding. My bad on that.
Okay.
But private. 100% all the way.
Next one. LGBT. We've kind of talked about that some.
Yeah.
So you're basically so the way you look at this, there's a couple that says, "Hey, I'm a guy. This guy's also a guy. We want to get married." You say, "Well, you're both grown up. You're both over 18. You're both 21. Whatever. You're both in your 40s or 50s. Who knows?"
Yeah.
You say, "Okay, good.
Yeah.
You're fine." Now, maybe you don't personally agree.
No, I do not personally agree with it. I'm cool with quote unquote cool with it.
From a government.
But where I say is you cannot enforce that on. You cannot sit there and cause an issue if a church does not want to marry you, or if a mosque or whatever doesn't want to marry you. You cannot force a person that does not want to marry you or whatever to do that. You know, so you cannot force other people to participate in your lifestyle.
Okay.
Of any sort. Okay. So that's where I fall on that. If you want to do it, fine. I guess go ahead. I disagree with it, but go ahead. Just you cannot force anybody to participate in your lifestyle. So
that, and then in addition, leave kids alone.
No, yeah, 100%.
Where do you draw the line at what a kid is?
Me personally, I say 21.
Okay.
I do believe that the voting age should be raised because straight out of high school. I don't know if that's necessarily good.
Okay.
It'll never happen, but I do believe that it should be raised. But so I would say 21.
Okay, good. I think that closes out LGBT. Your take on separation of church and state, when you hear that, and what your general thoughts are on that.
So separation of church and state, I think, has gone a little too far because people just don't want religion and politics.
Okay.
Well, they don't want the Christian religion and politics. Let's say that. So if you're a religious person, it's going to be part of your politics too. So I don't believe that the church should sit there and make the say of everything. So I do agree of the church is not what we look to for our government, but we do look to God. So sure, I'm for the statement of separation of church and state, but I'm not for the agreement of separation of religion and state or separation of God and state. So that's where I fall. Yeah.
Okay. Religion in general, you are for, because you mentioned the Constitution, complete freedom of religion.
Complete freedom of religion. Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
We already talked about freedom of speech earlier. Education. So you kind of got into this a little bit regarding government. You're like, well, if people were being taught the right thing in school, you would be okay with government school. You're not currently okay with government school.
I believe that school systems, schooling is good. But the school system does need a massive overhaul. We've got to stop teaching, especially in the elementary, middle school, and probably even the high school. Actually, from elementary to high school, we've got to stop teaching social issues and just start teaching academics again. Okay. We do not need to be teaching the LGBT agenda. We do not need to be teaching the trans agenda. We don't need to be teaching any agenda, left or right. Okay. Because first off, we live in a digital era. Kids are going to figure this out anyway. But this is just not something we need to teach. Even I would go as far as sex ed to an extent. Mm-hmm. Many people would disagree with me on that. But that's a thing for the household. Mm-hmm. That also kids are going to figure that out themselves. Mm-hmm. You don't need the school to teach you that. Mm-hmm. I'm totally for school, but we need to go back to just teaching academics. Things that you need to graduate. Things that you need for this. You don't need keep the social stuff out of it. Mm-hmm. As far as social policies, all this other hoopla. So
okay. Moving on. When you look at, let's focus on America, but you can also, if you want to talk about just the West, generally speaking, you can. Big picture, 10,000 feet. Where is this all going?
America is declining.
Okay.
We're getting too involved with things that we shouldn't be involved in, war-wise. Russia and Ukraine, we shouldn't be involved in that. When we send money over, we have stipulations for things of we're trying to enforce our belief, the Western belief, onto other countries. For example, when we sent money to Ukraine, part of the stipulation to that money was you have to make, same-sex marriage legal in Ukraine. Why? First off, why does that matter? That's up to Ukraine. That's not up to us. So I do think that America is creating a bunch of enemies that really it's going to come back to bite them in the butt later in life. Where the West is going, same thing. Also, but the West has kind of screwed themselves by not listening to Trump of becoming, talking about like NATO and stuff like that. They've kind of screwed themselves by not listening to Trump, especially like Germany, on becoming self-efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of their issues too. So I think the West is headed in the same direction as America is, but I think that America will go first.
What exactly is that direction? What exactly is it?
I could see another world war, and in this case, possibly a nuclear war.
But why?
I don't know why. I don't know why.
Okay.
Per se, but I think that America and just the West in general has made too many enemies or ticked too many people off.
Okay.
And when I say people, other countries.
Okay.
It has ticked too many countries off and tried to enforce beliefs too much or expand too much that it's like, hey, we're done with that era of time. Everybody just leave. And I think some people just want to be libertarians and just leave people alone. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think the West hasn't learned that. And so I mean, take Afghanistan for example. I think that's part of the issue too. Just from the history and stuff like that. So,
wow, okay. By the time you're a grandfather and I'm a grandfather, what do you think our world will look like?
Well, if Jesus doesn't come back by then, if we don't get into a nuclear war, just because that's the time period that we live in, with nuclear is now part of the option apparently for some of these countries. But if America is still here, I do believe that eventually we will go down a socialistic route. I mean, we already are with the healthcare system and everything else like that. But I believe that we by the time we're grandparents and stuff like that, we won't have our retirements. We won't have 401ks. We won't have any of that stuff. Everything, socialism, communism, whatever, something like that. I believe that the American dream will die.
Okay.
I do believe. And so I hate to say that, but unless something is done massively, the American dream will die.
And we're going to get to that, something to be done soon. In fact, we're going to kind of go to the next question, but keep it to one. And then later, we're going to go to all the solutions you think need to happen. Yeah. But quickly, one, if you could change, what is the big thing? If you could change just one thing in America now, what would it be?
Policy-wise or just in America?
Anything. It can be anything. It could be they need to stop teaching this. It could be they need to start teaching this. It could be stop this. It could be anything. Policy-wise.
The biggest thing that I would change is taking as America, we've taken our eyes off of Christ. Mm-hmm. That's one of the biggest things. So I would say the churches really need to step back up.
Okay.
Like another revival.
Yes.
That's something that I think needs to happen.
Amazing. If you could keep one thing in America from changing, what would it be?
Keep something from changing?
Mm-hmm. Because a lot is changing,
Yeah. Freedom of religion,
Okay.
So, yeah, freedom of assembly and worship.
So that's...
the Constitution.
That's starting to go away. You would keep that from going away.
Yes.
You would keep it
100%.
in place. Gotcha.
100%.
Good. All right. Now that I told you we're going to get into some more of the solutions. What does America need? Give me the list. So number one, you said most important is the churches need to step back up.
100%.
Give me the list. What else?
So yeah, churches need to step up. We've got to start determining. We got to start going back to black and white because there are a lot of things now. we did this thing of like, well, it's kind of a gray area. Well, yeah, but now we're getting into things that aren't gray areas, but we're calling them gray areas. You know, we're calling pedophilia a gray area. We're calling them maps. You know, like, no, they don't need titles. They're gross, sick human beings that maybe need mental help for sure, but you can't let them touch a child. That's not a gray area. That's just not okay in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, we got to stop this gray area thing. How you do that, I'm not exactly sure, but it's got to put a stop to it. Like I said, the school system, actually, there you go. That's a big thing. We got to take our school systems back to just teaching the things that need to be taught. Math, arithmetic, but that's the same thing. But math, reading, writing, etc., all that type of stuff. You know, the skills that you need. Bring back, you know, learning certain skills in school, like carpentry, etc. Forget the oh, well, my child identifies as trans. Don't care. It doesn't matter. That's for when you're an adult. That is not child stuff. That's adult stuff. So forget that. You can do that when you're in college because at least you pay for college. But it's stuff, then this is the stuff that needs to be taught, not this other wash.
Which, to reiterate, you'd be okay with someone saying, hey, I'm trans at 21. I mean, they can say it before, but they can't operate or do
exactly.
anything.
No operation. Yeah, right. You can't operate and, you know, mutilate your body with all that stuff. And no hormones, none of that stuff.
Okay.
Until you're 21.
Okay.
Now, again, if I've got to compromise at 18, then we'll say 18. But again, my perfect world here would be 21.
But real quick, we'll continue with the list of solutions. But real quick, what you just said, would that be federal or would that be a state issue? What would you prefer?
For that one, I think I would have to say federal.
Okay.
Just because that, I don't know, that there's just something about that just says that's got to be federal. I can't really I can't put a finger on exactly why, but for me that would have to be federal. Just because it would have to be more enforced. There's a lot into that one.
What other solutions?
So yeah, the teaching of the school system, also guns. We've got to stop this whole gun reform and everything else. False information. Look, if people want to look at false information, let them look at false information. I mean, I'm tired of the news sitting here saying, you know, that's another thing. A revamp of the news, or go back to, well, actually, no, not go back to the way the news used to be, because that's how we got here. Yeah, but no, revamp of the news and what they can and can't. The news needs to start going back to but the news needs to just give us facts and let us determine our opinions based off that. Here's the facts. This is what happened. You know, so yeah, stuff like that.
Or at least say, look, this is a liberal opinion.
Right, exactly.
Deal with it as you will.
Right, exactly. Something's got to be done about the media. The media
be open
both
about,
left, both right.
Yeah.
I'm talking on both sides. So something's got to be done with the media in general. And again, you know, that goes back to this is false information. Again, people aren't stupid. Let them determine that for themselves.
You sure?
Yeah. If you want to believe that, you know, Twitter said that Jeff Bezos was really born a female, fine, then believe that. You're stupid for not doing research, I guess. But, like, you know, again,
we all know he's actually Lex Luthor.
Right, exactly, right. Yeah, well, I possibly believe that. But no, I mean, no, seriously. We've got to allow people to do their own research and stop this censorship. Censorship is a big thing that is now an issue. So that's got to stop. Just to stop the stupidity. But no. Also, America used to be a place of helping your neighbor out and just helping your community in general. I believe that America in general, Americans have kind of, and why this is, I don't know, but I feel like Americans have kind of lost this, well, it's just me and myself, that me, myself, or me and my family. Well, it's like, well, what about your guy across the street that could also need a hand here and there? And again, that's not a government issue. I just believe America in general could get back to how it was of like, hey, you know, like, you know, I didn't live in this time, but, you know, my parents did. If you were new to the neighborhood, people brought you like food, welcoming gifts. We don't do that nowadays. You know, stuff like that. If we could go back to stuff like that, that would help out a lot, just in general, you know, communication. That's just on an American level and just a personal level that I think could change as well. Trying to think, covered guns, covered LGBT. taxation needs to be figured out. And as far as what to be like, we need a revamping of the taxation system, in my opinion. Probably won't ever happen, but yeah. Also, yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else. Yeah, I don't think I can think of anything else major, but I'm sure there's plenty. But
great.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to close us out. And thank you again for being on. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem, man.
And so, those of you that follow the podcast know that you can follow the two of us on Zoo Nation. There's an Instagram profile. We have an account. We also have a Telegram, and we do have a Facebook, and we actually have a Twitter as well. But please go to the YouTube channel. You can follow me, this platform, on this YouTube channel that this is coming out on. You can also follow me on Telegram at basedjosh_2012. And thank you very much for tuning in.